you're saying, yeah, maybe draft a 5th-round quarterback if there is one, but not in place of signing a veteran quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like the guys that have played, guys who have started games, pretty clear the type guys they like, high character, low maintenance. But Nate Sudfeld ain't cutting it. I think you need a guy that started a ton of games. I've been saying this name for a while. I just think Andy Dalton. Because again, I think could you get him for like $2 million? Because I think ideally they want to have their cake and eat it too. Like they want a guy that like, hey, if he had to start for a month with our talent, we'd go 3-1 at worst 2-2. But we don't want to pay $10 million, right?
Yeah. I guess my question with him would be, he made 3 last year, and
what team was he on?
The Saints.
Oh yeah.
And probably, I mean, I think you'd have to argue he increased his value. 18 touchdowns, 9 picks.
I think his value's kind of in that, the 2 to 4 or 5 range, depending on like, the dominoes. Because some teams that would like him, right? I think there are a lot of teams, let's just use the teams with sweet quarterbacks. Like they've just had Chad Henne. They just would like, clearly probably a high-level guy just as a backup because at any moment they might need to win a game and that would be their game plan. But could they sell him like, hey, come here, $2 million? Hell, you might get to like Pack could go down. You could start a month and fucking things could go sweet for you.
Yeah.
Or does he more likely to like go to a shittier team where he might play and get like 7? Then there's the Mike Whites and the Heineke's. Wentz. Can I get Wentz? Wentz probably the more I thought about it, maybe a little too much drama surrounding him.
Yeah. I wouldn't want Wentz in the locker room, but you make the point. I mean, he's beat you twice. I wouldn't want him around Trey Lance and Brock Purdy.
I think value that Dalton has that a lot of guys like Jimmy does not. I guess Jimmy kind of had this, but it only lasted a game. Like Dalton's done it all. Been the starter, prepared as a starter, 1 game as a starter. Been a starter because a guy got injured, came in. Then just been strictly the backup. Like he's just done all the roles, clearly a high character guy. I think you need guys that kind of check the box. Has been the starter, knows how to do that. Has then been the backup, and that's where I think, I don't know internally what they would think of Heineke. I think Heineke would fall under pretty intriguing, right? Depending on how much he costs. Like has been a starter, has been a backup, clearly very well liked, tough.
Yeah. I think where Heineke gets a little bit in a gray area that Dalton fits in is being a backup quarterback is one thing. Being a backup quarterback for a young quarterback is something else, because you might actually know more or be better than the young quarterback, but the team has determined that developing that guy is more important than playing you. And so you're kind of in an awkward spot where you might be in a meeting room where you know the answers that the starter doesn't. You might be looking at the defense and you know what to do when the starter doesn't. And that takes a certain level, I think, of humility. And Taylor Heineke seems humble, whatever, but he might think like, no, I'm at a point in my career where I need to go play right now and prove that I'm a starter. Andy Dalton clearly wanted to prove some stuff. I think he said that, but he might be a little easier to have. All right, Andy, I know you're better than Brock. Like right now today, you might be able to throw more touchdowns against it. Maybe he's not better, but you know what I'm saying? Like he might be a little more malleable to all of that.
16-4, Purdy. I think Purdy.
You know what I'm saying, though.
Yeah,
I think there's a difference between you're the backup because you lost the job and you're the backup because that is what you're here to be.
Well, I bet if you ask like Andy and Veach, like, what's a void you have this offseason? They'd be like, Chad Henne is a void. Not from a playing standpoint of being able to throw and run the offense, but just like we can't quantify really what he brings to the table, right? He helps our coaching staff. He helps communicate with Patrick Mahomes, high-level guy from a work ethic standpoint, perfect fit in the room. That is not just a plug-and-play thing. We really valued what we had with him for 5 or 6 years. We know that it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult to just like get the same plug and play, like high level guy works. If we got to win with him, but having him every day, cool with being the backup, not making that much money relative to quarterbacks. It's a difficult spot because Matt Ryan, let's just say he gets cut as we're talking. I think he'd bring a lot of value, right? Can bring a lot to the table for Brock and Trey of just having him over for dinner, being a pro, talking football, talking schemes, talking life, talking being a pro, all the unquantifiable stuff. I would say Matt Ryan's probably like close to a 10. Would be like a Chad Henne on steroids, given his accomplishments. But from a playing standpoint, like, what if I just tell you, like, Matt Ryan's playing, if he once in his peak, his best football, like if Tom Brady, Peyton Manning are like 10s, his peak for a couple years was like an 8, but now he's like a 2. Like, is he good enough as a football player? That's the hard balance of, like,
you're saying you have to prepare. They have to prepare for him to actually have to play.
Yeah, like just because your team's loaded, like he might be shitty enough that like it's not even, you'd still be in trouble with him playing.
Right.
And that's the balance of like ultimately, like I get Josh Allen likes Matt Barkley a lot. Like clearly they're buddies. But is Matt Barkley any good? And if you had to play, if Josh Allen had a high ankle sprain and all of December, when you're not a lock to make the playoffs, you had to win 3 of your last 5 games. Could you do that with Matt Barkley? Like those are the conversations I have to have if I'm a GM. Because ideally, if our guy goes out for the season, more than likely, if we're not the 49ers last year, we're screwed, right? That was always like, who's Peyton Manning's backup? And Bill Polian's like, Peyton Manning goes down, we're all in trouble. And he's right, because there's no or Tom Brady. You can get lightning in a bottle like with Matt Castle and stuff, but like, can Matt Castle, the thing with Matt Castle, not can he play a season, but can he play a month? Can he play 2 games? Because that's the best case scenario of if your quarterback's out for the season, usually that's just a football nuclear bomb went off if your quarterback's good, right? You're fucked.
Yeah.
Like
and
Andy
the Niners
Dalton,
have made
remember when Dak shattered his ankle? I think Andy was his backup. It was like if Dak had rolled his ankle and missed a couple weeks, no big deal. But then when you had to start the entire season, it's like, that's a problem. That's what made Purdy kind of unique. It's like, well, maybe you can just win a couple games. And it was like,
kind of
maybe
unique.
this guy can just
the
be a
most
starter.
unique players we've ever seen. One of the most unique seasons we've ever seen.
Ultimately, my point on this is it is a very complicated situation. There's not like a right or wrong answer, and you don't truly know it until like you really get in the season. Because more than likely, I can tell you they signed Heineke, they signed Dalton, they signed
Mullins,
whoever, Mike White, any of these names, Mullins. In the offseason, it can be completely fine. Be like, yeah, we love this guy around. It's all good. None of that really matters, right? Because all these guys that we're talking about are pretty high-level guys.
I think you got to sign the best player that
you
can't
can sign
afford,
Nick Mullins, actually, can you?
That you like. No, he's not good enough, but I don't think. But I don't know that Mike White is either. But I think
Kyle's like,
again, I think it's I think it's as simple as you sign the best player that you can afford, that you think is a good, I mean, like, is Wentz the best player that you can afford? If he is, you might go down to the next guy. But they may not. They might go like, guys, we might need him to start half the season. So we need to sign the best player that we can afford. That's what we got to do with this position.
It was weird because they were like famous names, even though most of them weren't good. I will say this about Gruden and Mayock, that era. Weren't they always trying to like, can we catch lightning in a bottle with like whether it was Mariota, Peterman? Like they kind of tried that,
I don't know that Peterman was quite lightning in a bottle. He was.
When I say that, they were just saying like, we love this guy coming out. We actually think he's good. Mariota was much more established, but that mindset of like getting a guy with some upside that was cheap, that's played, that's a high character guy, that knows when he's acquired he's going to be the backup. But Mariota for a while was in theory, was the best version of that. It's hard. I mean, Mariota's a bizarre player.
Odd player, beat the Niners, but then like abandoned the team, it seemed like, but hard to know because always kind of heard he's a good guy. Has been a backup. I feel like if I pulled up last year's game log, he actually wasn't that accurate against the Niners that day.
I just don't think he's a very accurate quarterback.
Oh, correction. He was one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the history of the league that day. He was 13 of 14. But he's not. He's a 61% passer last year. So
people forget, just because, I mean, part of the business these guys are in is to make statements. And listen, I like a lot of the guys. There was a lot of Steve Young comparison. And Marcus Mariota, by all accounts, met him one time when I went to an OTA practice in Tennessee. Introduced myself because Joe Bernardi, buddy of ours, who's now coaching actually for Ole Miss, had been with Oregon. So people fucking love that guy. I think that kind of overvalued his play almost, because you'd always said, like, at Oregon, some of these people kind of helicoptered in and out with him. Like, this guy's going to be Steve Young. It's like he overthrew guys in college that were open. And clearly, and he just, I would say touch is not really something he has. And he doesn't have a huge arm, so he's not like some explosive player. But he's actually bigger than you think when you meet him. He's like 6'4", and he's so likable, and he's clearly smart. You like want it to work.
Yeah.
But it just
donated a lot of money to Oregon. They got the facility we're talking about, got a whole room dedicated to him.
I mean, you spent a lot of time around there. Have you ever heard anything even remotely negative about the guy?
No.
I think he's like beloved by people that know him.
Yeah. The only thing he doesn't like when he comes back to Oregon, he doesn't make it about him, which means he doesn't do like, hey, I'm, they can't say to him like, hey, Marcus, we set up all this stuff for you to, to parade you around. He doesn't, but I mean, fans just media, which is fine. Like,
but if you're calling a spring game, like, would he even come up to the booth and BS or that? No,
wouldn't even do a sideline interview. I think
just because he doesn't want to make it about himself, or he's probably not. He's a little.
I just don't think that's who. I don't think he doesn't. It's just not him. I don't think because he's being rude. I haven't gotten that impression.
You could argue this, right? Like he's got a little introverted nature.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Maybe.
Ideally, with my backup quarterback, like I kind of want him to have this weird balance of being like the beta because he's the backup, but also have these alpha, like just being in there. Again, I think whatever Chad Henne had going on, it was kind of working.
Yeah, I think you want a guy that was an alpha and knows he's not the alpha anymore.
I mean, Matt Ryan, I just don't think Matt Ryan's any good. That's my issue.
Yeah.
He checks all the boxes.
Maybe you're right. You want kind of this, if you were doing a movie, if you are casting a movie, you want like the sidekick party guy, right? Who like keeps the room loose. That's always the Chase Daniel vibe. I can't,
when
he sets up the games.
Exactly. I watched 2 episodes.
He gets the beer
of the Arizona Hard Knocks in season. Colt clearly brings that to the table, right?
But I think Colt's out. Like Colt wants to be the starting quarterback. Colt thinks he should be. That his career hasn't quite played out the way it should.
True, but when he's the backup before Kyler, he could handle it no problem.
He's a great mix. I think he's a wonderful mix. Like he's the ideal. I think
he gets seriously hurt.
He did get hurt last year, remember? Because they ended up on McSorley. And then he got hurt, I think. But to me, Colt would be like some version of Colt McCoy would be a great backup quarterback.
Remember last year, what was Colt? Like $1.2 million? I
remember when they signed him, it was crazy cheap. I was like, the Niners needed to sign this guy.
You agree the Niners, in a perfect world, they get exactly what they want for under $2 million. Like they do not want to spend a lot on this.
Yeah, they have an $11 million quarterback room.
It's not that sexy, though he's become relatively a big name just because he's had so much success since he's been on the team. Like the kicker situation, are they just going to let Robbie walk? Because I would imagine he's going to get some offers. Are you just going to bring him back for $5 million? Are you going to draft a kicker?
They're looking at kickers.
I've been a part of drafting a kicker when David Akers went to the 49ers and we drafted this dude from Nebraska who immediately could not make a field goal. So
do you remember his name?
I want to say Derrick Henry, but it's something Henry.
Yeah, Peyton. Peyton, maybe? Was it Peyton Henry? Or was he good?
I just remember him walking. You meet him. I mean, nothing alpha, manly about the guy. And then he starts kicking and everything's missing. And David Akers went on to have like the best year of his career with Harbaugh.
Niners do great with like old kickers who've been through the wars, right? Cold weather guys. They need a cold weather guy.
Are the 49ers more likely to overpay Robbie Gould on a one-year deal or draft a guy in the 5th round? When you think about their head coach and what he wants to think about.
Well, yeah, overpay Robbie Gould on a 1 year, which is what I would recommend they do.
Give like Robbie Gould like $6.5 million.
Whatever. One thing's established with them in the recent history of this franchise. You need a experienced cold weather kicker.